So we move to partition matrices, where we've got a matrix A here defined in terms of other matrices. So notice this matrix A11 is given here, and this matrix A21 is given here. So A11 means row 1, column 1. A21 means row 2, column 1. So let's put the matrix A together. So putting A11 in, and then A21. There I have the first column of the matrix A, and now let's move to the second column, A, first row, second column. So that's this one. And then second row, second column would be this one. All right, so let's move to the third column. There we go. That's our matrix A, broken up into blocks. All right, so let's put together our matrix B here. So the matrix B, this looks pretty straightforward. 6, 4, negative 2, 1, negative 3, 7, negative 1, 3, 5, 2. Okay, so they want us to write A and B beside each other. So let's get A here. So 2, 0, negative 1. 4, 3, negative 2, 1, 1, 3, 9, 7, 1, negative 3, 2, 4, 8, 2, 5. So that's the matrix A. And then here would be B. Okay. So then it says multiply together if possible. Now let's look at the size of this. This is a 3 by 6 matrix, and this is a 5 by 2. So this is not possible because you know these numbers have to be the same. All right, let's look at this. So A is not the identity matrix, but what this is saying is that if I multiply A times A, I get the identity matrix, I. So let's look at that. So if I take A squared, A times the matrix A. Okay, so we have to remember how to do this row column multiplication. So I'm multiplying this row times this column, right? So 1 times 1 plus 0 times 3. So that gives me a 1. Okay, so now I'm going to move into this row times this column to get this position. 3 times 1 plus negative 3 times 3. So that gives me a 0. Okay, so I want to make sure to do this color coding because how to multiply is really important because we're going to move into variables shortly. So this row times this column will give me this entry. So 1 times 0 plus 0 times negative 1. So that's a 0. I'm going to take this row times this column. So 3 times 0 is 0 plus negative 1 times negative 1. That gives me a 1. Look at that. That is the identity matrix I sub 2. All right. So let's break this matrix up into its blocks and find out that M squared is equal to the identity matrix. All right, so looking up here, you can see that this is the matrix A. This you can see is I sub 2, and when we just kind of like implied, I just say I and we put the size in that we need. What would this be? This looks like negative A. And then this here looks like the 0 matrix. So this M can be broken up into A, 0, I, and negative A. So let's take M squared. So I'm just going to write it out so that I can multiply correctly. All right. So we're going to take, let me get some colors going, this row times this column to get this entry. So A times A plus 0 times I. So this gives me A squared. Okay, this row times this column, I times A plus negative A times I. All right, so now let's move to this row times this column. A times 0 plus 0 times negative A. So that's a 0. Now this row times this column, I times 0, that's 0, plus negative A times negative A. So that gives me a positive A squared. So let's simplify this. So we know from above A squared is I. 0 is just the 0 matrix. This is A minus A, that's 0. And this is the identity matrix. Look at that. We just showed that m squared is I. All right, so here we want to solve for x, y, and z. So that's what we're solving for. So our answers will be x equal, y equal, z equal. And we've got information about A, B, and C that they are invertible. Okay, so let's multiply this outside so I can compare entries. So this row times this column, and order matters, right? A times I plus B times X. That's the first entry. And how about we just do the comparing of the entries in the matrix right now? So that will give me 0, right? First row, first column gives me this entry right here of 0. All right, so let's take the second row times the first column. So that gives me C times I plus 0 times X, and that would give me this entry of Z. Right, so let's go to the first row times the second column. So I'd have A times 0 plus B times Y, and that would equal I. And let's take this second row times this column here. So C times I plus 0 times Y equals 0. Okay. So let's see what we've got here. So this 0 times y is gone, so I have c equals 0. All right, didn't help me so much. Ooh, let's look at this one here. So let's bring it down here. So I have by is equal to I, and remember what I'm solving for is I'm solving for y. I've got b here, but I know b is invertible. So let's multiply both sides on the left by b inverse, so that y gives me b inverse. All right, so I got b inverse for y. Check, got one of them. All right, so let's look at what I've got in this statement here. So 0 times x, so I have c equals z. Oh, look at that. So got that, got check. And let's find out what we got here. So a plus bx equals 0. So remember, I'm solving for x, so I'm going to subtract a, and then I'm going to multiply on the left by b inverse. Remembering that it matters which side you multiply on. So this negative sign can come out in the front, and then it's b inverse times a is x. X is equal to negative b inverse times a. All right, let's play with one more here just to make sure you really have the idea. So let's multiply this row times this column. So xa plus 0 plus, so that was 0 times 0, plus 0 times b, and that will be this I. All right, so let's multiply this second row times this column. So remember, order really matters. It's y times a plus 0 plus I times b, and that equals this 0. Okay, so let's just clean these up while I've got them. So I've got zeros here, so I've got x, a equal I, and from here, with this 0, I've got ya plus b equals 0. So remember, I'm solving for x, y, and z. So let's take this and solve this for x. I can see that I can multiply both sides. So here I've got xa equal I. I can multiply both sides on the right by a inverse. So that gives me I times a inverse is just a inverse. So I've got what x is equal to. All right, so I think I can take this and solve for y. So let's subtract this over. And then I'm going to multiply both sides on the right by a inverse. So y is equal to negative b a inverse. So all I have left to do is solve for z. All right, so let's go do it. So I can see if I take this first row times this column, I'm going to get z in there. Hopefully I'll be able to solve for it. So I have x times z plus 0 times 0 plus 0 times I, which is 0. And what does that equal? That equals 0. So then, look at this. xz equals 0. And I can x is equal to A inverse. A inverse z equals 0. So I can multiply both sides on the left by A. So I get z equals 0.